there we go. Live. And it didn't take so long this time, thankfully. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Give me free Patreon or I unsub. What? Did you lose your Patreon access, Amatif? Oh, man. That's just too bad. Or were you just late paying for it? Hopefully I'm in a Ten Hag agenda mood. No agendas here. No agendas here. I do have one major agenda, which is that I want to not want to gouge my eyes out watching Manchester United for the next 12 months. I can say that. Right. What are we doing? What are we doing today? Hello. My assessment is real. Keep it up. Hello, Vlado, my friend. Yeah, I think so. I was surprised, after Palace, I raised some warning flags, and just gotta wait, and you'll see that I am usually right. How are you from Florida? How is it? You got power there? I lived in Florida for some time, and I've been through a couple major hurricanes, a few pretty big ones. How was it where you were? Safe? Wet? Hopefully not too bad. Hopefully not too bad for you. I hope it was all right. What happened to the overlapping fullbacks? Yeah. We'll talk about that too, for sure. Don't worry. Yeah, I know some of the videos in Florida are absolutely crazy. So if you are from Florida and you are there right now, I hope you are doing okay. I really do, because yeah, they're never quite as bad usually as the media kind of like, they get real hypey about how scary it is, which isn't a bad thing, because sometimes it gets people to run away. I have lived all over the U.S. That's just a part of being American, I think, is the transient nature of our culture, and living in different places. It's sunny there and nice in Manchester. You're in the East Coast near Miami. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're all right. Yeah, we're going down to Florida in a few weeks. I think it's right during the next international break, thankfully. But kids have school off and all that, so we're gonna go take a Disney trip. Make sure that while you're here, before we get started, like the video. Please get it cooking for me. Appreciate that always very much. You deployed swift water divers from Chicago to North Carolina. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be wet everywhere, right? Through the entire East Coast as this thing is kind of moving up there, which is pretty crazy. But, I think they're a little bit lucky that it didn't, they're a little bit lucky that where it hit, because the initial land movement would have been right through a much more densely populated area in Tampa, but it shifted up the coast a bit. And fortunately, I'm not saying it's good, but fortunately, it was a less populated area of Florida that ended up getting the brunt of it. Halifax, Nova Scotia made it to alive. Awesome. Glad to have you here. All right. Well, what do we want to talk about today? I do want to talk about today some things that are important, because there's obviously interesting topics, right? I noticed that, both Simon Stone and Laurie Whitwell were bombarded with questions about Ten Hag's future. And we'll talk about Project 150 and all of that as well. I did notice that everybody was kind of being bombarded with questions about Ten Hag's future. And unfortunately, that's just the case. Happy birthday, Ashbjorn. They were bombarded with it, and unfortunately, this is the situation when, with how things went with the manager through the summer and through the end of last year, where, people were riding the high of the FA Cup. You kind of knew if things didn't continue into the new season that it was just going to become a topic again, because pretty much nobody was convinced. Very few people were convinced, and most people were in a boat of, okay, well, you won the FA Cup. let's see how it goes. But they want to see that momentum continue. And so it's not surprising, given the start we've had to the season, that we've won like 6 out of our last 18 or 19 Premier League games, that we still cannot beat some of the worst teams in Europe with ease, that people are increasingly frustrated with this, especially when you look at the summer that we've had, because United had a very good summer. Mazraoui's been starting. He's been fantastic. De Ligt has been starting. He's been fantastic. The signings have been good. Xerxes been starting. He's been good. It's like you can't, even those 3 players alone have been a huge positive to the club. We've improved the squad by so much, and yet it looks in a lot of ways like more of the same. So it's understandable that at this point in time, people are frustrated with what's going on and where we are at. And so those are the questions. So, right. So what is the actual situation here, right? What is the actual, where do they stand on this? I informed you very correctly on this last year, about how they went about it, even though in the end they really didn't kind of follow through where they were intending, but I will explain the reasoning for that as well. And it's understandable too, and it is relevant to the current moment. Oh, hello, Bazimon. Oh, yeah, thank you. You're always hanging out in the watch-alongs as well. Good to see you. So, how is it now? I explained last week that there was encouragement over certain aspects of the progress that they were seeing with United. That there were certain things that were better that they were seeing with our performances this year so far. However, as it was, it wasn't enough to sit there and say, okay, yeah, this is because of the manager, or is it simply because we weren't injured? And I think that's kind of the problem at the moment, is that the progress that you're seeing, the improvements that we're seeing, they're not so much to a level that one could sit there and say, is it the manager, is it not the managers? We just don't have so many injuries, and we have better players that we've brought in. In aligned with that, they were aware of and had been seeing very specific pitfalls and holes in the way that we were moving forward despite some of the progress. Things that were showing up as potential problems. Now, Laurie said this, I've said this is totally a fact. They are not sitting with Ten Hag and saying, you need to play this way, you need to pick these players, you need to do this. They are 100% not. They have had many communications and discussions about the way in general that United should play, attacking football, what they want to see, all of that. But they're not telling him how to play. So when they see these pitfalls, they're not sitting there and saying, hey, you need to move this player and do this in order to fix that. It's about Ten Hag fixing it. And where they were at was they see certain signs of progress, but there were things they wanted to see improve, and that the problems that were starting to show up again be solved. And I'll go into some of the specifics of that in a minute. Because I've pointed out some of the specifics, and I know for a fact that there are people aware of these specifics too, funnily enough, who are actually experts in this area. So they're aware of a lot of these negatives as well. They don't want to sit there and say, okay, you're under pressure already, and you have to start winning immediately. But as I said in the last international break, they wanted to see how this period between the last international break and the next one went for Ten Hag and for the team in general. And we have 3 big games coming up. The last 4 were supposed to be where United built some serious momentum. They didn't. The Palace draw and the 20 draw are inexcusable games in their eyes. They're not going to accept excuses. They're not going to accept, little things, because you can miss a chance, you can do that, but the margins were not that big, not as big as people are making out for them to be. So they were supposed to build momentum off of that, and they didn't. So now it makes the next 3 games really big, because if you won all those games convincingly and you were showing a positive style, you can lose a game like Tottenham, against a tough team. You can lose that while still playing the right way that you want to play, that you've been showing, that has been producing results. You can excuse youth and transitionary periods against top teams, against not getting results against top teams. Those excuses are not accepted against relegation level teams and teams like FC20. They're not accepted, because you should be able to put any 11 from Manchester United out and win that game. You should be able to win it convincingly. One could say Tottenham got lucky yesterday in some of their games, but if you watch the goals that they've scored, they're easy chances. Easier than we get, despite people looking up and misunderstanding the purpose of XG overall. If you watch their goals scored, they're easier chances than we get. They're from a few yards out, sometimes in open nets. And, that was down to 10 men from 7 minutes. They didn't have proven goal scorers. Sarr, who scored against us last year, is 23 years old. Brennan Johnson's 23. These are not stunning star players proven at top level football to score goals that we're missing. Our chances, as I've said before, they're not always the same. They're not all created equal. We create them in spurts. Against FC20, we didn't really make good chances. There was progress, but we didn't really make good chances. And the goal we scored was a nice scrappy goal, but it wasn't a nice scrappy goal with a great finish. But beyond that, we didn't make great chances. There was a couple of good shots. Yes, and exactly that, right? The reason you're in the job right now, Alejandro Garnacho comes from the academy, scores you a goal in the FA Cup final, and Kobbie Mainoo scores you a goal in the FA Cup final. You can't use youth as an excuse for not beating bad teams when youth are carrying you through your best results. Scott McTominay saved Ten Hag's job last year too, another academy player, even though he's not young. It cannot be both ways. It cannot be both ways, because the young players have been some of our best players. Amad Diallo is playing some of our best football. Kobbie Mainoo, we know, Xerxes been incredibly important. He could score more goals and all of that, but that's fine. So there's a lot of the excuses are not really things that are going to be accepted, right? They're not really going to be things that are accepted for those types of games. There are games that are more understandable, and there are games that are not. The Liverpool one didn't hurt him that bad, because you can lose that kind of game. The football was concerning, but it wasn't that bad. So there's these pitfalls that they've seen showing up in the process that they want to see him correct, because they're not going to sit there and instruct him how to correct, because that's not how they're running the team. That's not how they're running the squad. That's not how they're managing. So that's part of the essentially the challenge, and what they're looking for is for him to improve upon that. He has to improve results. I've told you before, there's a balance to this, right? When you talk about style and progress and all of that being more important than results, you have to understand that that is a two-way. There's just two aspects to that kind of statement, because some people try to use that to make some sort of gotcha thing, and it's not like that. The point was, you cannot play bad football and scrape 5th and 6th and say, hey, it's all good. You cannot play, they don't want to see us play defensive counterattacking football and be in 5th and 6th. If you play good football and you're in 5th and 6th, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can play good football and be in 10th. The point of that statement was, you cannot just scrape results with pragmatic defensive football. That's not what we're doing, for what it's worth. So the qualifications are twofold. We need to be within a touching distance of top 4 through these next months so that we can push on for that and be progressing in a style of football that is attacking, that is forward thinking, and that is something we can move towards the future. If you take the point on this Project 150 and all of that, I have said this, that it's going to take years, that their view of this is years. I told you that for a long time, that they're not expecting us to win titles anytime soon. But in order to win by that time, and he said by that time for what it's worth, you have to be on an upward trajectory. You cannot be not, you can't be playing football we're not going to be playing moving forward. You have to be playing the right football year over year over year and getting better and better at this. You want to see an upward trajectory year over year over year. So this year they need to see a good trajectory because you don't go from finishing 8th to winning a title in 2 years. It's a step-by-step process. And really, even making top 4 and top 5, you're probably 2 or 3 years away from winning a title when you have good, when you have the kind of competition you have in the Premier League. So it's a twofold situation. You need to, it is. It's really a twofold situation. You have to be improving in your results and in your style of play. And right, that means that in 2 seasons, we should be challenging, right? That means not next year, but the year after, we need to start challenging for the league because, I think Liverpool won it their 2nd or 3rd year. They were really challenging for it. Arsenal have been challenging for 2-3 years and they've not won it. It takes time, aside from the random things that occur. You have to be up there consistently. And as Barada has said before too, it's not about winning at once. It's about being there all the time. So if you're saying win it by that year, that means before then, you need to be at a level of challenging every single year, right? You need to be at a level of challenging every single year in order to get there, because you're not going to win it every year like that. So really, it's this year, next year, the following year, we need to start being challenging. But that means we need to be in Champions League. That means we need to be in getting places. So yes, not beating 20 at home is, you are 10 years away if you can't beat 20 at home. You see, that's a problem. If you can't beat relegation teams away, you're not challenging anybody anytime soon. You are years away from that because the progress is... that's like the bottom of what needs to happen. So it's a two-sided aspect to it, It's a two-sided. There's 2 ways to go ahead with this. They need to improve results. It's not really true. They're not going to judge him till Euro's back. He got De Ligt for a reason, and De Ligt is starting in the team. I think that was a bit misquoted. The point was that they want him to have pretty much a full team, but he's got enough. Again, I'll tell you this. It's not about, there are levels to these things, okay? There are levels to how these players are judged. There are levels to how these players are judged and how the team is judged. Against the really good teams, they'll be more favorable looking at it and saying, okay, we want to see what you've got with everything available. And he's got that. He has as full a team as you're going to get in the Premier League, right? Everybody's missing people. City are missing Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne and Rodri for the whole season. Is that going to be an excuse for Pep Guardiola for them to not perform? Absolutely not, even though he's way more important than anyone on our team. Arsenal are missing players. Tottenham are missing players. Everybody is missing players, and yet they perform. So it's not really like that. They are judging. They want to see strength versus strength against the top teams to get a judge of how it's going against them, but that doesn't really add up for the smaller games. So regardless, they want to see results improve because we cannot be in 10th by Christmas. We cannot. They don't want to waste the season. They don't want to throw it away. Champions League is huge for our plans and our goals long term. Because realize that in this whole 150 plan and all of that, you've got to be attracting talent in the next summer and the next summer, and you've got to be building something, and you need to be getting experience in Champions League football, and you need the money. Because if we're going to be doing a stadium and everything that's happening right now, we have to have that extra 40, 50 million. And the revenue is even higher now. You have to have that 50, 60, 70 million. And we lose 10 million from Adidas if we don't get it as well. We have to get there, okay? We need that money in order to actually build up to the top level. We cannot build a team that will compete with the teams in the Champions League and at the top of the league if we are not in the Champions League and into the top of the league. So that has to happen. And there are concerns over these certain issues, and that's up to him to resolve. Now, he's not on the cusp of being sacked or anything like that, but as I said, between the last break and the next one, they wanted to see real progress and measure where they're at, and so far, they don't believe so. They do not believe that there has been progress between these periods that constitute things continuing. In fact, the feeling right now is that it's unfortunately slipping back into old habits and a bit of a decline. If we do have a poor run in these next 3 games, then during the next international break, they will start to have discussions over what that means and planning for the future. These are not people who will sit and do nothing and not have plans. Does that mean that they're talking to managers? No, they're not talking to managers, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is not coming back as manager for Manchester United. They're not talking to other managers actively, and by they, I mean Dan Ashworth, Wilcox. They're not talking to other managers and lining them up for the job. They're not actively working on alternatives, but these are people who have plans. Who plan for everything. And these are the types of discussions that happen during these breaks with these people. They will have these executive meetings, they will get together, and they will say, where are things going? Is it good enough? And as of now, if we were to have a poor run over the next few games, they will be having discussions over what needs to happen, essentially. And kind of firming up a bit more contingency plans to this about what to do next and everything, because they won't let it go on forever. So I'm not saying, yeah, if we lose the next few games, he will be under immense pressure and it will be a problem for him. That is just the reality of it, but they haven't started discussing things with anybody as of yet. King Rollo, I think if you and all fans were brutally honest, we all know he won't succeed. With who are they thinking of changing him with? It's pretty obvious that they're at least thinking about it. Right, so there's 2 different aspects here. There's the aspects of actually working on it, and there's the aspects of thinking and planning. They've been thinking and planning for a long time on all of this. And it's not so much, it was very complicated. It was complicated in summer. It was very complicated in summer. But one of the major issues was Dan Ashworth was not in the building. And there was a big fear from Ineos and management at that time because Jason Wilcox was the only person in there. And that they didn't have the right person to make a call and get the right manager in if they were to make a change. They were worried about that. They were very concerned about that because Dan Ashworth is the person who ultimately they want to make this decision. Dan Ashworth is the person that ultimately would want to make the decision on Ten Hag, but also ultimately would want to make the decision on the next manager, not anybody else. Now, that doesn't mean they're not valuing other people's opinions and things like that. Jason Wilcox was tasked with evaluating Ten Hag last year. He gave his recommendation. We all know what it was. So he still has his views and opinions and concerns over where things are at. So it's complicated because at Manchester United, at a club of this size, with the money that's been spent, with where we have been so far this season, you cannot keep getting these results. Even if there's some progress on style of play, and even there are still major holes tactically that they are seeing that are the reason that they believe that we're conceding chances and goals. So, yeah, he has a lot to improve. And no, it's not going to be Gareth Southgate. I've told you that before. last year I told you Gareth Southgate was not coming. So I've never changed my stance on that. It's a scare tactic to me. Not to say that they don't know Southgate, that there aren't people who like Southgate or all of that, but that wasn't on the cards. It was a bit of a lazy link. Graham Potter was far more likely than Gareth Southgate. Far more likely. And he's given an interview to the Telegraph this morning. You could read into that if you want, about returning to management. I'm not saying, but that's just me teasing you. But he was far more likely, and he was hired, I believe, by Dan Ashworth as well, right? But far, far more likely than Gareth Southgate. Graham Potter was. So, anyway, it is what it is. So, I hope that kind of explains it. No, the fans are not getting a vote. And I think this whole example has showed you why it's stupid to listen to fans when it comes to football decisions. I'm not talking about the stadium. I'm not talking about the things around the great part of the club. But when you have these polls and all these things going, at least half of those fans are going to flip-flop 1 week to the next, in, out, in, out. You don't listen to them when they want a manager out. You don't listen to them when they want a manager in. You just make the decision from an objective basis on your judgments, and that's it. That's all. Like I said, yeah, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has not been a topic of discussion, so that is not something worth really mentioning either. But look, they've got concerns. They absolutely have concerns. But they're going to give him some time to see how it goes, and to see if he can correct some of the problems that they're seeing, and to see if they can improve on the results. And but the clock is ticking. We can't continue scraping by doing 8th, 9th, and 10th forever. If it goes really bad, that will speed things up. If we're in the middle, the time will get dragged out, but not endlessly. If we improve on the results and play good football, then, if that continues and we're in touch of top 4 and we're still in our competitions by January, then Ten Hag will stay the whole season. So, this is an intriguing kind of point in time that we're at, and there's a lot up in the air. But yeah. So 2 draws and a loss keep him in a job. I don't think he'd get sacked during that international break, even with that. But the discussions would start with those kind of results. Yeah, unless we're getting incredibly unlucky. Then and we've performed really well in those games, and it is really just bad luck to get those results. Then yeah, then it would start the discussion. That's not good enough. You can't not win at least one. At least one. I think a win and a draw is the absolute minimum from these next 3 games. And I think the win cannot be the Porto one. You got to get a win in the league, and at minimum draw in the. Well, it's complicated because they're so important. You can't beat Tottenham, lose in Europa, and lose to Villa. That would be very problematic, because then you're in real trouble in the Europa League. So I think you actually got to win 2 games, frankly. I think our players have an opportunity to do something here. No. King Rollo, now Ashworth here for a couple months, and we all know Ten Hag isn't it. So who would you say are more likely to come and replace him? We put Van Nistelrooy as interim and wait to summer. Honestly, I said before, I think it would be Van Nistelrooy as the interim. One of the things I also said is that, which Laurie did confirm too, is that if Ten Hag were to depart, you wouldn't really see the coaches depart too. Now, they can run all the stories they want about how it was all Ten Hag choosing his coaches and all of that. I think there's half-truths in all of that, and that's why that's the answer. It's not just because of Ten Hag that Van Nistelrooy is at Manchester United right now. And the answer that if he were to go, that Van Nistelrooy might stay is pretty telling in that case. And it's not just me saying that, but it is what it is. I think there's a little PR in that, but people can say what they want, and that's fine. That's fine. How do I know, Glenn? Well, if you've been following for some years, then yeah, I do claim to talk to people who understand and know things, especially on the side of at this point, especially on the side of, you know, Ineos and their management and things like that. You can accept it or not; it's okay. But yes, there are things that I do know and understand, and I stand by all of that. Okay, so yeah, scoring goals, accountability for them would be a start. True, yeah. Players should score goals. It's not the only problem by far. And not all chances are created equal. You know, like there was a thread yesterday. Maybe, let me find it actually here. I'm going to have to be careful with this because it's got like a video and I don't want to get the video, this thing copyright striked. Hold on a second, because I'm gonna pull up some things. We're gonna move to I don't know who would be a manager choice in the future. It's gonna change now with Dan Ashworth in. If they were to make a change, it would be different than it was before. Okay, so give it time. They were not super happy with the whole specific situation with you know, with. They were not super happy with the whole situation that went on with Tuchel and essentially turning him down, asking for a year off, stuff like that. You know, they were not super happy with that. So I wouldn't say, I don't know what that really means. But you know, there's a thread here from there's a thread here. And I'm just going to pull it up without, hopefully, with, it's just GIFs, so I should be okay. With talking about, here, I'm going to move this, and then we'll talk about some other things. It was talking about, like, our chance creation, right? And why it was not necessarily that good. And if you look at, like, this thread, it was actually about something else. But if you look what he's saying here, and he's talking about what we're doing, it's 2 outplaying 5. So this is against FC20. Our chance creation comes from very often being outnumbered, right? Look at the numbers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defenders around 2 or 3 Manchester United players. And then we don't score, and people say, can these fucking frauds finish their chances? But the chance creation comes from our players being outnumbered and having to beat the opposition, and not just in 1v1s, but in non-ideal circumstances, significantly non-ideal circumstances. And that is the part of it that gets somewhat ignored when we're talking about, you know, Manchester United and their chance creation. More often than not, our chances are created not via systemic chance creation, not via overloads, not via the basics, but via players having to do something incredible to get into the position to score. And then that only happens once in a while, and then missing their chance. I mean, if you go look at a lot of the major chances we missed in the first game against Fulham, Rashford picks up a huge error by the defense, right? Passes it to Garnacho, he misses it at the end. Not systemic creativity. Now, he should have finished it, but it wouldn't have changed our points total or anything anyway, right? And that's one of the other aspects of, you know, looking at missed chances. Did it really affect our points total? We missed chances against Liverpool. It didn't affect our points total. We missed chances against Fulham. Didn't affect our points total. There's really one game that it might have affected our points, which was Crystal Palace. But even then, those Garnacho chances are difficult. He gets sent through the lines, firing it first time. They're not as easy as people make them out to see. I think our better chances were actually off of the set pieces, which you can create, and which I think we have done better at on set pieces. So, you know, that's one of my kind of big takes on this, that it's not just a matter of finishing chances, why we're not scoring goals, because creating and making chances is not all equal. There are systemic ways to make easy goals via overloads and not asking players to do the incredible. Now, You will very rarely find us making chances that don't require players beating 1, 2, or 3 men through the dribble or with a killer pass. The third goal against Southampton was a good move, right? We were surrounding them. Dallo makes an inverted or overlapping run. Casemiro finds him through the lines, cut back. That's the type of goal you should be scoring. Those are the type of chances you should be creating game after game. And that was against 10 men. So we needed 10 men to make that kind of overload. And that should be a little bit telling on its own. But we'll discuss that because there are specifics as well to some of the tactical issues and what's going on and what they have concerns with. Are there truth to the links with Rig at Sunderland? Yes, and I explained this in a video, the last video, I think, that they were definitely discussing it and scouting him, talking with, alongside all these other young midfielders that I've been mentioning recently. He is someone they're at least watching. But the left back, I think, is becoming a bit more of a priority concern at this point in time. All right, so let's talk about the lineup. This is your lineup that everybody voted for last time. It hasn't changed much since the start of the season. We're going to vote for it again today and see, if it changes. This is what we voted for before the last Premier League game. I'm not sure if this is going to change. I'm not sure if, get one of our opponents sent off every week. Exactly. And that'll work. I'm not sure if it'll change or not. Obviously we have a lot of players healthy now. For me, my two biggest things are underperformers right now are Lisandro Martinez and Bruno Fernandes. From an individual standpoint, I think those are two players I'm a bit worried about. But I want to explain the Martinez thing too, because I think there's context to that. And I think I know I'm not the only person with this view that one of the adjustments we've made recently is exacerbating some of the downsides with Lisandro Martinez as a footballer and is not necessarily helping us do any better. So let's get to voting, shall we? Yeah, let's get to voting. Striker. Shoot, I gotta move my drink. It's in the way. Striker, who do we want? Xerxes, Højlund, or do we want a false 9, Mount, Bruno? Let's go. Make sure to vote. And yes, thank you for reminding people. Please like the stream if you're here hanging out with me. Yeah, Klaus, it's a tricky thing. I think the biggest thing is that it gets Dallo more involved in the game, which is good, but yeah, we'll talk about the downsides. Ahmad does not do enough. Interesting. Angie, I feel we've seen progress in our play. We're improving across the field. However, I just hate how stubborn Ten Hag is. There are some dumb in-game tactics you can't get rid of and hate his attitude. Understandable. And I do think there are things that are progressing. The problem is I think a lot of the things we won't change are... And some of the decisions make other problems worse, right? And a lot of the Smokey, yeah, that's who it was. I can never remember, and then I do afterwards. Then some of the decisions get really questionable. And as I said after Palace, it's kind of like a lot of times what I said after Palace is I felt like he didn't get what was working because the changes ruined it. And then again, against 20, the subs, man, the subs. We were fading in that game, and then before the Eriksen error. But even why that goal happened is something I wanna share here as we get into it. The other thing is this taking Rashford off and leaving you again with just these direct forwards and sticking Bruno out wide. I have no idea. I have no idea why that the insistence on that. It is highly illogical. All right, Xerxes. I'm gonna do the wingers as a pairing just to save a little bit of time. Rash, Ahmad, Rash, Garna. Garna, Ahmad, there. Because I'm sure that one of those combinations is what people want to see. How much do you think the pressing patterns and attacking patterns are a result of new coaching staff and less on a Ten Hag? A lot of the pressing patterns seem kind of personnel based. That was one of the unfortunate things. Like when we saw the press early on when Mason Mount was playing, as soon as he went off, we stopped doing it. And then the other factor is like when you take this necessity. Anthony's the other option, Bruno Fernandes. When you take this necessity to play Bruno, and then Eriksen starts playing well, and so Ten Hag's like, Eriksen's got to play, which is fine, but then drop Bruno, because you now imbalance your whole team to get Eriksen in there for offensive reasons. That creates problems elsewhere. But we will talk about that. Yeah, it's other for Anthony. Vote. Yeah, Rashford Ahmad is still winning this one. I think that it's probably, 60% to 30%, 10%. So yeah, it's like 60-40 in terms of people who want Ahmad or Garnacho. I agree, Anthony. We'll talk about that. Yeah, we will talk about that. With Xerxes, it has to be Rashford Garnacho. And the thing is, I actually agree with that too. That's what I said earlier and about preseason and when we signed Xerxes. And it's just balance, right? We talked about this in the pre-match of the last one. Our inability to get into the box confidently and strongly, like to get runners in behind. We don't have enough penetrative, to go back to this word and keep doing that. But we don't make enough penetrating runs. We don't have enough players that are getting in there. And I think we still don't. And it's a balance, though, because you don't want 3 runners and nobody creating, and you don't want... Yeah, we will talk about it more and more. Can Højlund play as the right as well as an inside forward? Maybe. All right, so Rashford Ahmad is going to win this vote. I think against Tottenham, it should be Garnacho, but that's just me. Yeah, we're not going back to that. Just a fan. That was a tricky one. 10, Bruno, Mount, Eriksen. And then I'm going to give you some pivot options too, once we decide on this. What about 4-2-2-2 without a 10? Then you got to overlap. I mean, you have to think about it. We almost play that way. Xerxes drops in. It's kind of a mess. Xerxes drops in, plays with Bruno as 10s, and then you'd ideally have Menu and Ugarte behind them. But then you need 2 forwards ahead of them. But you have to have fullbacks overlapping like fucking crazy to play that way, right? You have to, or you just do not have enough attack. Those fullbacks have to get all the way up there. Mount. Oh, Mount is winning. Mount is winning the vote right now. You know what I think our best midfield will be? Is Mount, Ugarte, and Kobbie Mainoo. I think it's our most balanced midfield. And I think if you do that, you could actually attack with your fullbacks and have an energetic midfield. We've talked about this sort of pseudo-Liverpool-y way of playing. That would be the way to do it, to have 3 really, really hard-working, cohesive players in the midfield who can pass together, who can link up, who can control the game, and then... there's some creativity in there still, but then you could have a Xerxes dropping in to help the midfield with creativity, get runners around them, get fullbacks up, create, press, win the ball. I think there's a balance here that could work. Mainu, Casemiro, Ugarte, Scaloni ball. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's that too. Yeah. And again, I can go back and share the stats. for the positives we've seen about creativity this year, it's not Bruno. It's not Bruno. So clearly, we can create throughout the team. Amazing. Mason Mount has won a poll for being our starting 10. Bruno has been that bad. I hope that's not just my influence and agenda recently, but intriguing. It's good. So let's say you have Mount in there. Let's take our pivot. Ugarte, Menu. I think that's number 1, but that's just me. Ugarte, Eriksson. Menu, Eriksson. Casemiro plus someone else. Let's try that. It's definitely my agenda. No, I think everybody is pretty unhappy with was Ugarte bought for Amorim? No. No, but have you seen how well Ruben Amorim is doing this year at Sporting? Have you seen it? Go check their record. Unbelievable. And I think people think Sporting are like this out and out best team in Portugal. They're not. And they usually aren't. Man, they are absolutely flying this year. And they won 2-0 in their first Champions League game as well. The goal against 20 came from a Bruno pass. Okay. I don't think it's a pass nobody else can make. It came into Dallo, who tried a Cruyff turn in the box and then lost it, and Eriksson picked up the rebound and scored. It wasn't exactly like this explosive pass. No, it was a back 3 for Ruben Amorim. He plays a back 3 pretty exclusively. His striker, Gyökeres, is absolutely flying, too. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between him and Rasmus Højlund, too. I thought when I first, when I watched him. Amorim plays like, I wouldn't say it's possession. No, I think it's more, it's very aggressive in its fast transitions. I constantly use Liverpool as an example because it's more in that direction than it is a possession team for sure. It's more of a fast transition, fast attacking transition and press heavy 3-4-3 than it is with than it is a possession based 3 at the back. All right, Ugarte Mainu is winning this one pretty clearly. Rasmus is the first. I don't want to insult Rasmus Højlund. I like Rasmus Højlund. Yeah. Portuguese gegen pressing, rock and roll. Yeah, essentially, yeah. But the difference in Xerxes controlling a fired pass versus Højlund is unbelievable. I mean, it's a little scary at times. All right. I'm gonna put I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna do it every week. We do this, and every week everybody votes for Mazraoui to be at left back correctly, and it's Dallo every week, and it becomes Dallo every week. But but Mazraoui always wins the votes, but it's always Dallo who's there. We'll see. Maybe it changes now. I still think Mazraoui would be better at left back. It's not that Dallo's been bad, but I think Dallo has been really good, but I still think Mazraoui would just be better on the left than Dallo on the left. It's just, maybe we can flip it. I mean, Ten Hag is never going to do it, even though we literally got all these things about how he signed Mazraoui so that he could play, because he can play on the left. There was briefs and everything about it. It's hilarious. But yeah, I think that'll be a focus next in the next windows in January, as for sure as well. That left back. All right, Mazraoui's still winning. I'll give it another second though, just in case there's a huge swing here of 20-30 votes for Dallo. Yeah, Ayun. The thing is, how has he carried us for 2 years? We were terrible last year, and I think how bad Bruno was alongside everybody else went under the radar last season because of the end of the season, but he was really poor alongside everyone else. And this year, I think what's happened is that I was thinking about this, right? I think what's happened this year is that our other players, this is an interesting thing, and give me your opinion on this. But one of the things I did realize or was thinking about is that I have very few complaints about our players this year. You know, most years I'll sit there and say, yeah, well, we've got these 3 players who are killing us every week, and the rest are doing okay. And I think the majority of our players are playing well, and they're upping their levels. I think that a lot of our players are improving in the midfield. A lot of are doing better. I think our forwards are actually doing fine performance-wise. I think most players have improved from where they were at last year, but Bruno hasn't. He's the same Bruno as last year right now. And some of that is form, and some of that is, yeah, but that's telling. Bruno was second in the league last year for big chances created. That should tell you everything you need to know about how certain stats can be misleading. We were terrible last year, and Bruno was not good last year. Anthony notwithstanding. However, his only appearance wasn't the worst, right? Against Barnsley. His only appearance wasn't the worst. But I think the levels of a lot of our players have gone up to where I'm not sitting here saying, well, the players are just playing badly. But Bruno's levels haven't matched. Lisandro Martinez has been kind of poor, but I also think systemically he's getting a bit exposed. The thing with the issue with Bruno as a midfielder is that I don't think the system exposes him. I think he breaks the system, unfortunately. Like when we're slowing play down a lot, he's still looking for the killer ball and stuff like that, right? That's a concern. But that's the issue, DB Cooper, is that I think the players are playing well, but they're not being fit together properly. And that's kind of the consensus from a lot of people. You know, that thread I was responding where I was showing that like 2v5 thing, that's an example, right? That's Xerxes and Rashford doing an incredible thing, 2 against 5. But the system's wrong. Why are they 2 against 5? Why can't we get them at least 2v2, right? So that we can do even better. The system is not helping them. The players are playing well, but the pieces aren't fitting together. That's kind of the issue. That's my concern, is that we haven't fit the pieces together well at this point in time. Licha MDL will probably win. But we could talk about Lisandro. You know, like that's how I feel. Like the pieces are not fitting. The pieces are good, but they're not fitting together, and that's pretty much purely on the coach. Last year was such a mess because the pieces were not fitting, the players were bad, the injuries were terrible. I still think he did a poor job piecing together what he had, but it's more understandable. This year, we've got good pieces, and they can't fit. And we talk about the midfield, for example, right? Like, this was supposed to be the plan. You start with Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo and Bruno up here. This was supposed to be the plan. Upgrade on Casemiro, get Ugarte in there, so you have 2 really hard-working midfielders to cover ground. Instead of fitting the pieces together, we throw it away, and we put a midfielder in here and start playing 2 creative players, one who's not Kobbie, Eriksen, who cannot cover ground and cannot run. So now you have to do the stupid inverting thing, and instead of having these hardworking players and having your fullback being able to get into these areas, and one hard worker here, and one who can get forward but who can go back and cover ground, you've just nullified your team. That's what I mean by the pieces not fitting together. It's making the mistakes of trying to put it all together. Yeah, we have a totally different team. Yeah. De Ligt is a slightly better version of Maguire in a good way. I agree. I like him. I like Maguire. So I said that a lot. I said that before, and I stand by that. you know, it's tricky here, this thing with Lissandro, because I think he has been kind of poor, but we will talk about that, like, tactical issue. And I'm not going to do a vote on this. I know people love voting for Bayindir. Fine, I'll give you a vote again. Because I know people were unhappy with Onana's positioning on that goal, but I still think Onana had a couple good games. Against Palace, he saved our ass again. And against Southampton, he saved the penalty. So I don't think there's really any justification for Onana not playing. You guys are going to vote Bayindir just to fuck with me because I put Onana in the team, aren't you? Mm-hmm. You're gonna. Yeah, but Hamza, what about Palace? For as much as we missed our chances, he saved us pretty big on a couple on the double save and on a few other occasions. I thought his kicking was really good that game too. By the end, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. A lot of it seems like we get stuck on these 1v1 moments when we talk about goalkeepers' positioning. But it like happens to everybody. We have those moments with Henderson. We have those moments with Dave. We have those moments with Onana. You can find those moments with Ederson. You can find those moments with nearly any keeper where in 1v1s they look like they're out of position. I don't really give a shit, frankly. Just stop conceding one-on-ones. That's my example. That's my solution. Stop conceding one-on-ones, okay? And then we don't have to worry about the keeper's positioning on one-on-ones. That's my take. Yeah, but Alisson is the best keeper in the world. I agree with you, but Alisson is legitimately far and away from me the best keeper in football. Maybe Courtois, but maybe Courtois is up there. Or was, I guess. Does not really start that much anymore, does he? I actually don't know where he's still at. Courtois, yeah. I mean, Courtois is up there for sure. Courtois and Alisson are the two best keepers in the world for the last few years. That's how that... So, you know, I'm with you, but I understand that. Alisson was, I don't know this season, but Alisson absolutely was in discussion for the best keeper in the world for quite some time here. When you factor in everything that he did, he is fantastic in his well-roundedness as a keeper. I think he's better than Courtois at a lot of things, but Courtois is, you know, yeah, a bit different, a little more old school with the way that Madrid play, but it works really well for them. Costa's great. Yeah, I do still really like Diogo Costa, and it would have been nice if we had bought him. So yeah, that's the vote. We got a change. We got Mason Mount in at the 10 from the viewership, from the chat. That's interesting. Yeah. Verbruggen. Yeah. There's good keepers out there. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'm in agreement with you guys, right? Because look, let's talk about some of the tactical flaws that are showing up and the things that are happening compared to what they should have been, right? When you start the year with Casemiro, the idea was that you can play a very aggressive press where everybody can get up, right? And you get the press, your 10 goes in, you create kind of this box, and you can press in a very aggressive fashion high up the pitch with the fullbacks following up. This is a pretty normal kind of 4-2-4-ish pressing structure that a lot of teams can do. And you still have coverage in the wide areas with the fullbacks following up the press from the wingers. And you still have the ability to do a lot of normal things, right? And then in build-up, I'm not saying a 3-1-6 is the only way, but the idea, of course, was that you could get this guy sitting in here. You could have a hard-working player who can transition in the midfield from defense to attack very well, which is Kobbie Mainoo. Let's look at the stats. Kobbie Mainoo still tops us in interceptions, but you can see when he came out against 20 briefly, and it was Mount Ugarte Mainoo for about 10 minutes there. I thought actually did pretty well together. Kobbie Mainoo is a really good midfielder because he's not just a defensive midfielder, but he can do the hard work defensively that Eriksen can't, and he's good at it. And he's physical and he's aggressive. But he's also really good in attacking areas. We saw him, I mean, he's on the ball exceptional. When he gets near the opposition goal, he finds the spaces, he can shoot, he can do it all, right? Incredible talent. So the whole goal was, you've got this player who can kind of be your in-betweener, right? You've got your creative player, and this will allow you to get, not at the same time, right? Because you always balance this. You push one fullback up, and the other one can drop in, and that will give you your overloads, your six attackers, right? And so in the build-up, you have less exposure for your center backs. They're less exposed, and you know, it's a lot easier for them. If you lose the ball, then generally speaking, you know, you'll have if you lose the ball, yeah, sure, if your fullback is all the way up here, you might lose the ball. But in that case, you have still this hardworking midfielder who can get back here and can do that job. The problem with starting Eriksen in this position is that he can't. And so it's almost a double situation. If you have to tuck your fullback in, you'll never get more than 5 players going forward, right? You just won't. It'll never happen. You will never get more than 5 players, so you'll never make the kind of overloads. And so like that example we looked at of the picture, you have one person wide and you have 2 players against 5. You're never going to overload the back line this way. Because, you know, these 2 are sitting on the midfielders and you only have the 3. You even saw 20 do it. They in a moment in the second half when they started, because before the goal, 20 were actually getting into our spaces. They got a few corners. They were attacking us. And how did they do it? Mazraoui was on the side, but they had an overlap and they were 2v1ing Mazraoui over here, creating overloads. When's the last time we had a Rashford and a fullback in a 2v1 against a fullback? 2 years? We don't do it. When's the last time we had 2v1 with Ahmad and a fullback against a fullback? We don't do it. And at the same time, what it also does is it pins their wingers back because they actually have to come back and track. So this is a problem because not only does it tuck this player in, so they're more in the central areas when they're progressing, which means that you're leaving Lisandro Martinez alone to defend the spaces. Defend the spaces and defend the channels. So how does that goal happen? Well, let's flip them just so we have the right personnel in here, aside from Eriksen, right? Dalot is getting forward now from the central areas. Eriksen ends up dropping back. Lisandro's defending a bunch of space. Attacker comes down here. He can't get him. Eriksen keeps coming backwards. Ugarte has to come flying from this side over to make the tackle. Eriksen picks it up, but look, these are all in the wrong position now. And Maguire's up here too. And then they run right through. So you're asking Lisandro to cover a left back space when he's not going to. When he's not going to do that well. If Dalot is wide, when we lose the ball there, he's running backwards from a wide area to defend into the space and force them back in towards the rest of our defense. And that situation doesn't happen. It just doesn't. He's forcing them inwards towards the bulk of the team. So defensively it causes issues, but offensively you also don't get the overloads in the same way that that we could be making, that we should be making, and that every team in football makes. So yeah, that is an issue that is known, that is identified, that I'm not the only person thinking about that issue. That is an issue. It just is. So, but it's a solution, and it's a solution to trying to create more goals, but it's again the wrong solution because you end up creating more problems. Shaw would tuck in sometimes, but when he was on the ball, he would progress by very often running, as he's left-footed, up the wings to link up with Rashford and get into wider areas. Dalot is really good. That's the thing. And that's where I'm like, this is sort of odd because Dalot is really good. And the inverting solves certain problems in terms of like the midfield gaps are not so open. But then we have fewer players in attacks. We have more penetrative runs. So one can say, well, we're not scoring enough goals. It's just taking chances. But it is. We're not creating easy chances made by systemic movements, overloads, things like that. And that's been a problem for a long time. When we got to the end of Solskjaer's time, right? I think that maybe what people don't remember who are pining for him back, we were really bad against low blocks. That was our problem. We really struggled with low blocks. And I think a lot of people were sitting there thinking, I know I was, that was our major issue. We could not solve low blocks. We could win the big games because we were so dangerous in transition, but we could not solve low blocks. And we did not have the attacking patterns. And so people would say, oh, there's no style of play. There's no attacking patterns. Well, there was a style of play, but in the final third, we did not have good attacking patterns. They were poor very often. They were better when Cavani was doing well because his movements were so good. He would drag players and create overloads just by nature of how good he was in doing that. But it was the minus. And so a lot of people at that time were thinking, we've got a good team. The biggest thing we need to improve moving forward is our attacking third patterns. It's 2.5 years later, we're still there for me. 3 years, maybe. We're still there for me. That is the biggest disappointment in my opinion, is that Ten Hag has not improved our final third patterns at all. In many ways, they're worse because now we're doing it with fewer players. Our fullbacks are even less involved. There were moments where it looked like we were going to improve it, but we haven't. And so I feel, unfortunately, that we are just creating problems to solve other problems that create new problems. And that is an unsustainable way of playing. I see a style when it comes to build-up. I see improvements in those areas. The issue is very often they end up being at the cost of other areas. The pressing is still haphazard to me. The pressing is still haphazard to me as well. But if we're going to beat Tottenham, we need to be able to get in behind their spaces. But the biggest thing is the midfield. There is such an energetic team that they play with. We have to be able to win in the midfield. We need energy. You have to start. Look, I can understand Ten Hag starting Bruno. He's going to, right? You have to start Ugarte and Mainu. You have to have that combativeness so that you have the fight in the midfield, so that you have the players who can get forward and back and cover the ground, and that you have to be able to use your fullbacks to get into the wide areas. You cannot just play everything through the middle. You can't do that against most teams, but you cannot just play everything through the middle. Tottenham will give us some chances, probably. They usually give up a few, but big chances. But we have to be able to win in the midfield, and that's the biggest concern for me is can we win in the midfield? So yeah, that's what I think. That's my overall take on where we're at, on where things are going. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It's interesting that people are voting for Mount to get in, which understands and I agree with. In Ten Hag's first season, we produced such a dominant performance against Spurs at Old Trafford. Yeah, with Fred. And there were reasons for it that he didn't spot and he changed, unfortunately. Yeah, this is better than a 10th position team. This is a very good team. We can score. We can beat Tottenham. We can. But you just have to get the decisions right. Now, in big games like this, tactics sometimes are less important. And people don't really agree with that, but it is true. You need more patterns against small teams than big teams. Big games are different. Big games are a little less tactical battle. You still have to set the team up right. But, everybody's got to perform. But I do worry if we inverting Dallo and all of that, the runners at Lissandro in the spaces with those forwards, those fast forwards from Tottenham, is a problem. It's going to be really concerning. That is a huge concern of mine defensively. That's my biggest concern defensively is Tottenham getting Lissandro out into open spaces, running the channels. That is a big concern for me. And it's funny because I know people are kind of the narrative's kind of flip, because people talk about Tottenham like they're like this awful team, and we're good but not taking our chances. But they've made as many as we have, and they've conceded fewer chances than us. So, not exactly. In fact, they've mostly just we've gotten more lucky defensively. They've still not performed up to their XG. I mean, most teams don't. That's part of the thing, too. If you look at it, most teams don't meet their XG, right? But they have done better finishing, for sure. Easier chances. But they've also conceded fewer expected goals. Comparatively, they have the third best defense in the league in terms of chances conceded. Ours is 10th. So it's sort of interesting the way that people talk about it. Like, if Postecoglou was the United manager, he'd be under way more pressure. But his team are actually playing better and getting a little bit unlucky on conceding compared to us. It's funny how it's flipped. I think he's right where he should be. They need to improve, but they're not playing bad football. They're not playing bad football. In terms of differential, I think they're third in the league. Expected goal differential, I think they're third in the league. They're not playing bad football. And their chance creation is quite good. So we'll see. They have some big flaws, but they're dangerous. They are a dangerous team to play against. So, all right, to wrap this up on the Ten Hag thing, as I said, yes, the next few games are important. Yes, they want to see progress. They're not seeing it. Yes, there are pitfalls that they want to see him correct that they have not seen him correct yet. Yes, not getting results in these small games is a huge deal because it makes it so that you can no longer afford to not win the bigger games, where previously you could have afforded to drop some points there if you were winning prior. No, they're not interviewing managers and doing that. No, they've not told Ten Hag he's on the verge of being sacked. No, they haven't actually done anything actionable about getting new managers in or anything like that, or making changes, people getting ahead of themselves. But if we have a bad run of results over the next 3 games, it will become a subject of discussion during the international break. Dan Ashworth is the main person who's going to be making decisions and running all of this. Yeah, that's what I've got for this video, okay? I might be putting out a video later, and I might be doing it live on a watch-along, showing, because I don't know if the tactics board thing that is actually launched yet. It's supposed to be at any moment in time, but I might put a video talking about it, showing it a little bit differently. But otherwise, I will see any of you Monday on the for the pre-match and for the watch-along as well. So thank you all for hanging out with me here on this Friday. I hope you have a good evening. I hope you enjoy your weekend up to the United game, and hopefully we can get it right and get something done that get a result, because I think we all definitely need a little bit of a pick-me up there. The mood will be very interesting afterwards. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you all. Have a good one. See you all later. Thank you for hanging out with me. Goodbye.